Go to the people, learn from them, live with them, love them. Start with what they know, build with what they have. But the best of leaders, when the job is done, when the task is accomplished, the people will all say, "We have done it ourselves." Lao Tzu wrote these words in 604 BC. Paulo Freire and Miles Horton, both great community educators, bring out this quote in the end of a very dear conversation they had together in 1987 that was made into a book called "We Make the Road by Walking." These words are so very close to the heart of community education. But who are the people? The people could be chopping wood. They could be going to church on the hill or tending cows. They could be marching in the streets, playing basketball, dancing, and playing music. They could be sharing a meal, cooking, cleaning, mining, going to work in a factory. Why haven't I mentioned playing video games in the basement, hunting, drinking, making art, worshipping as a Muslim, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi, or Druze, or camping out behind Hannafords, sitting in trees, teaching, going to the infamous office? Why haven't I mentioned golfing or politicians? These people could be black or white or any other shade, but if they've been part of community education, they will all say they have done it themselves, because they have. Essential to the principles of community education is a belief in all people's ability to create and become aware of their own knowledge, and to use that knowledge to take hold of their lives, to change society, to work towards freedom. All over the world, people are part of social systems that marginalize some and empower others, that often crush and exploit the many to serve the few. Dominant narratives are often taken on by all who live within a given system, which gives the system its power. Community education is about gathering communities of knowledge, sharing, and problem solving. It's about building with what we have, starting with what we know, and about the space to work and think together. Encountering a community's knowledge can empower genuine participation and action that can break through dominant narratives and serve to connect people to each other and to a new world. The beginnings of what can be recognized in the United States as community education began in the settlement houses of the late 19th century, most notably Hull House in Chicago, inspired by Tinby Hall in London and started by Jane Addams. In the settlement houses, which spread to other cities, eventually expanding to more than 400 in all, people interested in the causes of immigrants and the poor would pay room and board, living together and volunteering in programs that were started to meet the needs of the communities where they resided. Settlement houses grew out of Christian socialism and became the first community centers, running daycare programs, night classes, and advocating for workers' rights. In the 1880s, Miles Horton encountered Jane Addams in Chicago when he was first forming the idea that was to become Highlander Folk School. After visiting Denmark, Horton transferred the Danish folk school idea to the mountains of Tennessee, where Highlander became a center for social change. The Danish folk school idea arose out of the thinking and writings of N.F.S. Grundtvig, who lived from 1783 to 1872. Grundtvig was a Danish preacher, scholar, and writer with strong views that threw him from high positions to outcast joblessness and eventually to great national recognition. His main contribution to Danish society and to the world is commonly recognized in his idea for the creation of what he called schools for life. These schools would not teach lofty subjects in Latin to the elite, but would instead be communal living centers for common people that celebrated Danish language and heritage and focused on the critical social questions that faced Danish communities at the time. Grundtvig recognized that in order to become an active citizen of Denmark and of the world, it was necessary to have a strong grounding in Danish culture and identity, and that all common folk be involved in education that was relevant to them. These schools, which eventually spread widely, even throughout Scandinavia, have been attributed to Denmark's peaceful transition to a modern democratic society. In Tennessee, Highlander was a radical school that both acted out its beliefs and empowered people to act on theirs. Miles tells a story in We Make the Road about his childhood. When I was 13 or 14, I used to have to ride a horse 4 miles or walk to school. We didn't have a saddle, so I got tired and sore riding that old horse. So I decided I'd rather walk. I walked 4 miles there and 4 miles back, but in the meantime, I belonged to what was called the 4-H Club. That's an organization of farm young people that at that time was into helping young people learn to farm. One of the things that they promoted was pride in growing the best chicken, or the best pumpkin, or best hog, and I had what looked like was going to be a winner of a prize. And I never won any prizes for anything in my life. A hog that I'd grown from a little pig. Somebody had given me the pig, and I fed it on the bottle and raised it, and it got to be a fat pig. For the first time in my life, I was looking forward to getting some kind of recognition for something I had done. I thought the 4-H Club would give me a blue ribbon for this pig. We had to eat the pig because we didn't have any other food. My feeling was that I was being put upon by my family, that I was being taken advantage of. I started feeling very sorry for myself, and I went out behind the barn in the clover field. It was summertime, and the moon was shining, and I walked out in that clover field and I started to cry. I felt so sorry for myself. I just thought I had been mistreated. And I finally just stretched out in the clover, and I was there in the clover, sobbing away. And here's the moon and the stars. Everything was silent. Suddenly, I thought how ridiculous this is. Nobody knows. The moon can't hear me. The stars can't hear me. The clover can't hear me. No human beings around. Here I am, feeling sorry for myself, and nobody knows it. So what's this all about? And right there in the clover field, I decided I would never be sorry for myself again. That was not the way to go. That incident with the pig hurt me, but it didn't bother anybody else. It didn't change anything. So it's absurd. And besides, why should I feel sorry for myself when actually the cause of my sorrow was family survival? No fault of my parents. It was the fault of something else. When I stopped feeling sorry for myself and I started looking at where the blame was, not in my parents, but in the situation that my parents found themselves, there I was beginning to understand that there are non-personal sources, which I later identified with an oppressive system. Miles grew with this understanding of the world, and Highlander grew out of strong ideals. Miles says, "You can't have an individual right. It has to be a universal right. I have no rights that everybody else doesn't have. There's no right I could claim that anybody else in the world can't also claim. And I have to fight for their exercising that right, just like I have to fight for my own." In a deeply segregated South, Highlander was a place where blacks and whites lived and learned together. Many critical civil rights leaders passed through its doors, including Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. Also, Septima Clark, who started the citizenship schools, first as a project of Highlanders, which taught literacy to African Americans so that they could vote. The support of these schools was later taken on by the Southern Baptist Leadership Conference led by Martin Luther King Jr. Because they grew with the leadership of ordinary people in beauty parlors and on school buses, they were a great success, contributing to thousands of black voting registrations. Highlander threatened the dominant narrative of our social system, and there were repeated attempts to shut it down. Accused of communist activities in the milieu of the McCarthy era, authorities eventually revoked the school's charter under the pretense of illegal sale of alcohol. Apparently, they let black people partake in beer drinking there, something which was denied them everywhere else. So, what exactly is community education? We can look at some of the stories that have come before. But by its nature, it is a changing, adapting, and ever-evolving field. Who are the people now? Does the people include the earth and her people? Does it also include politicians, business leaders, and those of us who can mosey on relatively comfortably? Who are the people around you? in the spirit of Grundtvig and Jane Addams, Miles Horton, Paulo Freire, Septima Clark. What it's called for now. How can we all be prepared to be inside of the movement, as Miles would say?